Business is not about solutions. Solutions are final. Nothing's final in the market. What business is about are problems. If I want to solve your problem, I have to create a world of problems for myself. I don't care where we start. Who wants to go first? What's business? All right, we got a taker.
I would have to say business is like you're like trying to persuade someone like to buy something.
Trying to persuade somebody to buy something. Okay, all right. Over here.
Identifying an unrecognized need of consumers and coming up with a solution for that.
Identifying an unrecognized need of consumers and trying to come up with a solution to that. I'm going to go back and forth here. Up front.
I say it's the materialization of free cooperation and the consequence of task assignation.
Okay, so it's free association, free cooperation and task assignation. Okay, figure out what people got to do to cooperate. All right, back here, over to you.
Activity designed to satisfy a need, answer a question, most of the time to make profit.
Okay, activities to satisfy a need and make a profit. Okay, back over here. I'm going to go with you. I saw you, and then I'll go in the back next time.
Business is a way to solve the problems.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Business is a way to solve the problems.
Business is a way to solve problems. All right. I'm going to go in the back, and then I'll come up front. How about way back there?
The exchange of goods and services.
Exchange of goods and services. I'm going to do a few more. I did say I'd go in the back here. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So exchange of goods and services, great minds think alike.
It's a transaction that produces physical or any tangible value.
Physical or tangible value in an exchange, is that correct? Yeah. Okay. One or two more. Anybody else over here? Him, and then I'll go back to you.
Something that creates the value.
Creating value. Who's really wants to go? Because this will be the last one. You? Okay, you have the stamina. Go for it, yes.
I would say profit maximization for stakeholders.
Profit maximization for stakeholders. All right. And I did promise him.
Yeah, so with the assumption of exchange of goods and services, there's also an assumption of barter or currency.
So with the assumption, hold on a second, I am trying to hear somebody here. So
we had said we had decided on exchanges of goods and services, but there's also an assumption of barter or currency.
So there's an assumption of, well, you said an assumption of barter or currency. That takes the whole Venn diagram there, because you're either going to use some sort of exchange, money, or you're going to directly trade goods and services, through barter. Is that correct? So you got to trade something. Okay, so you have to trade something. It could either be an intermediary or whatever. You're persistent, so I'll take you. What?
We were trying to figure out, I was arguing that I think nonprofits are a business as well. That profit is not necessarily a component of business.
And that's a good point. And I will come back to that. So a great deal about exchange, obviously. Profit maximization, if you can. Maximization always kind of worries me because I'm not sure you ever have complete knowledge to really maximize profit, but you try. Free association, value creation. I may have missed a couple things, but that seems to be the general buzz in the air, right? Right? Okay, now here's the question. Here's the $1 million question. Why do we care?
To make money. To make money, yeah.
To make money? Make money?
Gotta keep the markets operating.
That's interesting. Is it like a duty to keep the markets operating, or that's just what it takes?
Maintains value of items and services and products.
Okay.
Because we have things that we need that we cannot get ourselves, that we want something to get from others.
We have things that we need to get, sir?
It's the way how we satisfy our needs.
It's how we satisfy our needs. That's true. That's true. Couple more.
Because I was about to say something like that, and it's just supply and demand. Some people think that they can do things to meet the demand in the market, and that's why they would like to establish businesses.
We'll talk more about purpose as we go on, but yes, there is definitely a vision of something that you could satisfy in the market. I haven't called on you, so last one.
Market help us to solve problems as humans?
Yes. I don't disagree with any of these, okay? I think they are pieces of the puzzle. But here's what I want to offer to you, and why I think, especially for this seminar, why business is really important, okay? Nobody is a Marxist because they read Marx. Nobody sat down and was like, I want to read Das Kapital. Damn, I'm a Marxist. No, they read Dickens or one of his lesser heirs. They read Upton Sinclair. They watched something on the evening news. The story drove them to the theory. We are miserable at the story. You could probably name on 2 fingers the people who have weaved the story that might have gotten you into this. One of them might be Rand, right? Now, you are the elite, so you've probably maybe read Milton Friedman, or maybe you've read some Mises. Maybe that's what got you into it. But if I push just a little bit further, there's probably a story there, something you encountered, something you saw, something your parents encountered, some regime you've lived under, something that breathes life into the whole story. See, and that's what business is. We talk about capitalism, we talk about economics, and I love economics. I'm a philosopher by trade, couldn't do the math, so I'm an econ junkie, but that's about it, okay? So we read these, Mises or whoever else, and they talk about capitalism, but the actual doing of it, the things that you were just talking about, the value creation and all of that, we don't talk about. We're supposed to somehow apply all this down to business, but I really am stunned by the number of people who are capitalists that know nothing about capital. It never makes it there. And it's great that Ryan was talking about the common law and you talked about the bottom up, but we don't even attempt to approach theory like that when it comes to markets. We don't treat business people like they really have anything to add to the theory. It's just they're out there to make money or solve needs or solve problems, which are really great, but they're just kind of like extras in the play, They're the chorus in the background, and the main actors are high theory of politics or economics or philosophy. And by the way, my degree is philosophy. I love philosophy. I'm not putting down theory whatsoever. That's the world I live in. But yeah, we just kind of here's the theory, and here's what people have to do. And I think in the first instance, if you want to carry the principles of classical liberalism or anarchy, whatever you want to carry out of here, you're going to have a story because, and I'd like to see a show of hands because my experience is, I got gray hair. So, I've gone out in the world and, whatever my flavor was for the day, whether it was Rand or Lysander Spooner or Mises, and I'm taking the message, man. I'm out there preaching the gospel. I'm out there, and people are like, yeah, oh, that sounds so good. That would be wonderful, but that's not how business works. How many have heard that line? I'm just curious. That's not how it really works. Hands. Yeah, it's the death objection. Because where do you go after that? That's not how business really works. That's great theory. Glad you guys had fun thinking about that all up there, and if humans were perfect or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I know how business works. And our response is, that's why we got to know more about business. That's why we got to know more about the story. That's why we got to know more about what goes into value creation. That's why we've got entrepreneurs coming to talk to you. I agree with the supply and demand, but it's more than that. Making money, yeah, that's important. But I've got people coming to talk, both at this seminar and the next seminar, they got enough to comfortably retire. If it's just about making money, that really doesn't make their story. And by the way, I have people coming who haven't been successful yet. And they're putting in 14-hour days for their business. That doesn't sound like money just doesn't do that. If you think it does, go into a job you hate, literally hate, and see how long it is before you quit, right? There's something else here. There's a gold mine, right? There are stories that abound. We need to get those stories, right? We need to understand that business is a human endeavor, okay? So that's part of the reason why I want to bring this out, why it's important. If we don't have a story, right? Listen to an environmentalist talk. Are they just rattling off degrees per year and talking about ecosystems being out of equilibrium and in some sort of death spot? No, they're telling you about the polar bears and the penguins and how the poor will be ultimately affected. It's all story. They're good stories. They think they're true stories, but that's what grips people. If we don't get the story, we're done. At least that's what I think. So we head on. The other thing I want to talk about, and it's in line with all of this, like I just said. First of all, business predates history, right? It predates the written word. We have evidence like the Druids that built Stonehenge traded, right? We have evidence that Native American populations in the United States would actually have big meetups to trade. It predates history. Yet history is a humanity. Business isn't. Business is just, what, something we do? There's an author, archaeologist, Denise Chement-Besserat. Has anybody heard of this person? No. So she discovered, well, in museums throughout the world, they had discovered, especially like in the Middle East and in that area, they had discovered like these little tiny symbols in clay, right? And there's several different types. Nobody knew what they were. And then there were things that looked like baked chimichangas or whatever, like these clay. Nobody knew what they were. Like stuff would go in them, but nobody. She figured out that this system was actually the first system of accounting, because what you would do is if I owed you a certain amount or you owed me a certain amount, we would take, if it was wheat or cattle, because these things now, they represent different things, we would actually put those in the clay pocket, if you will, and we'd seal it up, and then on the outside, while it was still wet, we would imprint what was inside that tablet, right, or that thing. And then that was proof of what was owed, right, kind of like a piggy bank. And then when time came to, settle up, we break it open. Okay, it matches. You have whatever, how many shocks of wheat you need or whatever, and we clear it. That ends up going to a two-dimensional system, but we still have the symbols. But now, instead of people actually possessing those pockets, because they're fragile and kind of awkward, we now have the first sort of phonetic representations of who it's owed to. In papyrus. So her argument, and I love this argument, her argument is that accounting led to the written word. Accounting is the source of writing. Now, I realize that definitions may have changed in the years I've been on the earth, but it used to be that history was the written account of what's happened, not just an anthropological account of what happened. Like history doesn't mean just the past, it means the written account. Shakespeare, English, or whatever nationality and language, there's poets and playwrights throughout the world, right? That's humanities. It's language, all depends on language. But business gets no credit. Business just led to profit. Business just led to people making money, maybe solving problems here and there. But not that somehow the business is a fundamentally human endeavor. It's like it's still treated like it's accidental. And yet, we've been doing it since we've been human. It's a part of who we are. Somebody said about nonprofits being a business. I think there's something to that. It's still part of the same thing. There'll be people here who know Smith much better than I do, but one of my favorite parts of Smith is when he talks about this sort of natural tendency we have to truck and barter. It's kind of baked into us. And yet we've let people deny that part of our humanity. Or we've let them call it evil. Or we've let them say in an ideal world we wouldn't need to do that. That's almost like saying in an ideal world you wouldn't need to eat or breathe or socialize. No, it's part of what we are. If that's your ideal world, then your ideal world is actually different humans. So the story is important, but not just that the story is important, the story is fundamentally human. And then the cool thing is, right? Oh, and here's I don't know why people don't think about this in business, right? So people go off to find themselves, or they go off into art communities, and they write, and they journal, and they do self-discovery, which is really cool. I did stuff like that when I was in college, right? And that's all great. And then, yeah, what do you want to do? You know, go talk to the guidance counselor. Are you joking me? Like, this is your time to figure out the impact you want to make on the world. This is your imprint. This is your story. This is what you're going to spend a lot of hours on, right? This is how you get to be you. Now, I know that I don't pretend that anybody's all that interested in me, but the work I do with the Academy, I'm choosing this right now over writing a book. Maybe it's because I'm a poor author, or maybe it's because I view this as a living book. This is something I want to create. This is the impact I want to have. This is the thing that I want to do. That, like a book or like writing, will live beyond me, and like a book, will be interpreted by those who receive it, and then go on to do whatever they're going to go on to do with. This is me living my story. And there are others, of course, who will choose other ways, and that's fine and great. But like I said, I really don't understand, in the university especially, we segregate off business schools. Like, they're totally separate. And it's, I don't know if it's mutually beneficial or a mutually harmful alliance, because you'll have the first 2 years of university when you do your humanities, and if you're at a modern university, and most universities, not all, Wabash is a nice exception to that, those first 2 years are not friendly to business whatsoever. Okay? I don't care what subject you're taking. I know of universities where, yeah, there's nothing friendly in those first 2 years. And then you get to your professional degree, and they'll tell you, they're like, great, you survived that. That's really not relevant to what you're doing. We're going to do SWOT analysis. We're going to do A/B testing. We're going to show you how to keep the books and that sort of stuff. So both sides, even though it's friendly, but it just washed the humanities straight out of business. And that's terrible, because now you're going to end up spending anywhere from a third to a half of your life doing something that's, I don't know. It's inconceivable to me, but yeah, it's not what you should be doing. And by the way, too, it's not just, if anybody have a chance to read Andrew Carnegie's The Gospel of Wealth? Yeah? Yes, yes, yes. What was it about? Do you remember?
It was about the idea of accumulating wealth, not just for your own personal benefit, but the idea that you live in an enabling thing that can help you make the world a better place. Kind of a response to a lot of critics of the accumulation of wealth in the late 19th century.
Right. It's
Make it as much money as you can, but at the same time, then giving it all away.
yeah.
For charitable purposes.
Yeah. And the whole reason Carnegie writes this and he says this is he doesn't view doing business as moral. In fact, he almost views it like he has to atone for it. And he writes the Gospel of Wealth, because, and this is correct, is because giving money away is even harder than earning it because the benchmarks aren't there, right? If I'm earning the money, I have my cost structure, I know what I'm buying, I know what I'm selling. With giving money away, so you really have to, so that's why he writes the Gospel of Wealth. Here's a guy who, I don't created how many jobs, helped the United States and the world, in the industrial age. I mean, how much did steel do for people? Look at the skylines of New York. Look what houses where people were living in. Yeah, I know Pittsburgh was polluted beyond belief, okay? But as I tell my students, you gotta compare it at the times, right? We wouldn't want to go back to that. But if before that you were living on the farm and living with animals, and your relative wealth and lifespan compared to what it was in a very smoky Pittsburgh, yeah, I'd take the trade any day, that trade. Do I want to go back to that smoky Pittsburgh? No. Okay, but it was a step up, right? The whole thing that created was a step up. And he viewed it as, if not a sin, just as kind of like, it doesn't count for anything. Oh my God. How did he not just end his life if that was all the meaning that he saw in it? I guess he had enough money to give away at the end that he found purpose there. But that I just can't find that. It's just a miserable way to exist, I think. And I don't think it's right. I don't think it's true. And he probably didn't have anybody to tell him otherwise. I don't know if he'd have listened or not. He's a rather strong-willed man. But you get the point. This notion that, once again, business is just something you do to make money or whatever else, and it's not really part of being human, we really got to push back against. And once again, that's going to be found in the story. What people have done. And that's why like I said, I've invited entrepreneurs to talk to you about that and their various experiences with that. So that's something I want to get across to you right now. And I want you to start thinking about that, because it's actually more. Half the battle, I don't like using that term necessarily, but we'll use it. Half the battle is in framing the problem. If you accept the framework of the person you're talking to or trying to persuade or arguing with or whatever else, if you accept their framework, go home. Because you've accepted their terms of engagement, and guess what? If somebody else is setting the terms of engagement, are they going to set that as beneficial to themselves or to you? Right? So you've already given up half of it if you just, right, accept their framework of, well, that's what business is. But here's how it really works. That's why it falls flat, right? And I've been told by people like this, hey, tariffs is not the big thing. We don't really, profit maximization. None of that's, it's the cultural issues today. It's the personal choice issues today. All of that's involved in business. Right? If you have a cause, if you have something and a need, you think you could be served, you could do it. Right? You could go out there and make products for that group. If you don't, this will sound weird, but I've been in Ulta more than once. How many know what Ulta is? A couple, few? Yeah. Is it just like one type of person now on the advertisements in the Ulta store? They got all kinds, don't they? They got all kinds of products, all kinds of makeup, all kinds of hair products to serve different population. And for whatever you want to think of it, that includes trans women. If that's your passion, you can get in the market and you can actually serve these people. Nobody talks about that. I'm not saying you have to. There's all kinds of populations and markets you can serve, but this is something that you can do. And yet, once again, nobody talks about that. I need a drink. It'll just be Diet Coke at the moment. I put it down here because these little bits can be edited out, and I don't give inadvertent product placement ads to Diet Coke. Or I don't have them calling up wanting to sue me because it's like, oh my God, what are you saying with us? I get no money from the sponsorship of Diet Coke. Do any of you know any business people? Do you like them? Who do you like? Who do you like? I heard somebody say, yeah, but they don't have to be famous. In fact, the more famous they get, the more problematic it gets. You like Bill Gates? Who likes Bill Gates? Why do you like Bill Gates? Yes?
Because he is living just beyond the business, which is to...
So he's giving it all away.
The gospel of the... What was the book? The gospel of the wealth. You know, he's doing a lot, and I saw an interview. And what I found meaningful in his legacy is like he's trying to give all his achievement and giving back to humanity, which is rational in some way, because if he doesn't do that, someone, maybe his son or brother or whatever, will come and maybe waste it in some other way. So that makes sense for me.
Yeah, and I don't mean to be an objectivist here or something, but see, that's exactly the greatest things Bill Gates did was way before he did the Bill and Melinda Foundation. This is Act 2. You think, I'm going to put something out there, and you can say, think of what Microsoft and Windows has done for the world. And also, too, I mean, they used to call it lingua franca, but it's one of the reasons a lot of people know a lot of English, because you had to read the. Now I know that they ended up translating and stuff like that, but this is like kind of it's not only that everybody had Windows, but it's kind of like a unifying. And I don't mean to be colonialist, but it could have been any language, but there's kind of this unifying thing come all of us on that platform. So I actually got fired from a job saying that he shouldn't be paying taxes at all.
Sylvia Acevedo.
Who?
Sylvia Acevedo.
Why do you like Sylvia Acevedo?
She used to be the CEO of Girl Scouts of America. I really like how she went against all odds and proved people that women are fit individuals. I know that she made history a long time ago, becoming the first woman and the first Hispanic to get her master's in engineering at Stanford. She worked at like other companies such as Apple and proved that women also have a degree in business, and proved that if you're a woman and you want to go into business, if I can do it, so can she. So I love how she was able to go against all odds and prove that men aren't the only people that can be in business.
Yeah. Just like in sports, people can be role models, and they can be role models in business by doing business.
Yeah, she's a role model for like young women who want to go into like STEM or even business.
All right. Did I see a hand over here?
A business person I like is Marcelo Claure. He's the richest person in Bolivia.
Okay.
The country. And what he does now, I mean, he was CEO of Sprint at some point, but he's also president of Baiza, which is the corporation that administers Bolívar, which is one of the biggest sports clubs in Bolivia. But what he's doing now is to try and rekindle some investment in the country. And by doing so, he's also working with universities like Harvard or the Ivy Leagues to try to get people from my country to study there and then gain all their knowledge and bring it back to the country so we can fix our economic issues. And I think that's very honorable to send students that could be like in the farmlands or couldn't get the opportunities to study at universities like Princeton or Harvard.
Okay. Sir.
And also, I mean, for me, I would say like my favorite business now has been Westinghouse. I mean, he's a dead man, but
Yeah, no, that's fine.
but I mean, I wouldn't say I like him because of like things he did, But why I think is important is because of his business, and he and Edison as well, it kind of democratized electricity because back in the day, you know, only certain people can afford to use electricity, and then, you know, use electricity for like, you know, for productive ends. But both of these figures made sure that eventually we had things like the washing machine, because of which we could do other things, you know. So their business kind of liberated us by just allowing us to pursue leisure.
Right, and I find it interesting, and once again, I'm being a little nitpicky here, but like democratization, that's political theory we're trying to do. They just made it cheaper. And not only did they make it cheaper, but there were other people. The history of electricity is really interesting because when electricity first goes into houses, you think about this, there are no plugs. So you actually have to like hardwire your toasters and stuff into the main. And there aren't any cutoffs. So there's stories of people getting electrocuted, like installing electric appliances. So the first actual plugs were, because they ran them into the gas lamps and stuff, were actually like a light bulb screw that ran the wire down, and then the plugs were invented. But all of that, no fanfare, no just it making it cheaper, coming up with like standardized plugs, have made us all immensely better off. And you talked about the washing machine, and Hans Rosling has that wonderful TED Talk where he talks about the washing machine. Yeah, there's an unsung hero. So I think it is a great thing, you know, to sponsor students and everything like that, but to give us the electricity to, or not give it to us, but sell it to us, or windows, or just doing that is what's made, like when you look at that hockey stick, right, that people talk about in GDP when you have free markets and stuff like that. That's what led to everything being better. Just people doing that every single day. And so it's that story. Because even now, I mean, we're all market friendly in that, but you know, what have business people done that's good? We keep drawing on this almost Carnegie-like or social consciousness, like what they've really done good is they're helping students or helping. That is good stuff. I'm not against charity or anything. I'm not a monster, but like this ability to even recognize that just being in the trenches and you know the blood, sweat, and tears to put out a product that is valuable enough that other people are willing to pay for it. That's amazing, right? I mean, you can do stuff, you can make stuff. You'll find a lot of these at local fairs and stuff that nobody wants to buy. But to actually, right, and that, you know, people talk about business being selfish. Are you nuts? If I'm just sort of selfish, right? If I'm just kind of like in me world, okay, I'm never going to satisfy the consumer. I have to get into your head. I don't mean in a bad way, right? I'm not talking like some sci-fi thing, but I have to figure out what you want. I got to figure out who you are. Now, not across the entire spectrum. I don't need to know everything about you, your family or whatever. Just this slice, I got to know not who I am, not what Bill Kline wants. Nobody cares about that. I have to figure out what you want. That is incredibly other-oriented. That is incredibly social. That's inherently social. Business isn't antisocial. It's actually the exact opposite. It's entirely social. And I have to get out of myself and out of whatever my head is to figure out what you want. And then I can satisfy your needs. And then if I do that, if I do all of that, then I get my money. Then I get my return. But first things first, I gotta satisfy you. Kings, conquerors, politicians, they're the exact opposite. I can talk to you about what you want, then I get mine first, and maybe you'll get something. Sorry, being a little cynical, I know. But in business, I want to point this out. It's incredibly other-directed. It is extremely social. Something else I want to point out, too, if I may. I want to just make sure on the time here. And this is in the story of business, right? This is in the story of now, like I said, this is very social. I've got to get into your head. People might disagree with me, but I'll throw it out here. Business isn't about solutions. This is the kicker. This is the one. This is where the story truly lies. Business is not about solutions. Solutions are final. Nothing's final in the market. What business is about are problems. Now, you've already said that once, right? Problem solving. Somebody has a problem and then I solve it. But watch the dynamics of this. So you have a problem, okay? You want Diet Coke. You're like, I don't want, yes you do. You just don't know it yet. You want Diet Coke. Now, they call it T sub zero, right? Time zero. They were just at the very beginning. My life is fine. I'm just like, woo, I'm having donuts. I'm sleeping late, drinking coffee, playing video games. And I get wind of this and I'm like, you want Diet Coke. Well, you know what? I know some bottlers and I know where I could get the ingredients for this. I could put together a production line. And I know some people who are good at marketing. So what I'm saying here is that if I want to solve your problem, I have to create a world of problems for myself. My life is problem-free right now. But if I want to solve your problem, I have to take a host of problems onto myself now. I have to attract and accumulate. I have to make my life way more problematic than it was. I don't think people realize that about business. They just see this, I'm providing a solution. Well, that's all you're doing, and then you're getting money. Of course we can tax you and take it because there's nothing human about that. There's nothing necessarily special or taxing about that. It's like, whoa. No, I've just complicated my life. And if you don't realize that and you raise taxes high enough on me or regulation, I don't need that. I can walk away. You need to appreciate the fact of how much I'm on video, so I won't. How much crap I'm bringing down onto my head to solve your problem. Now, there are people we know that are really good at creating problems for themselves. That's not what I'm talking about. We all know those kind of people. They couldn't get a cup of coffee without some sort of drama. Like, that's not what I'm talking about here. Because here's the kicker. I don't just have to bring problems on myself. I have to be good at assembling that set of problems, right? So there are all kinds of things that have to be done. There are all kinds of problems I could bring down on my head. I have to be very good at assembling those problem sets and connecting them. And ideally, I guess, keeping the problems I need and not taking down more on my head or other problems that I don't need. So an efficient production line. So if you look at something like, I'm forgetting his name now, with Lean Startup. What was his, anybody know who wrote the Lean Startup? Read it, it's a great book. I mean, so the book is basically about, the story he runs is you look at some software programs and the engineers who aren't concerned about the people out there or whatever, they're concerned about their own things. They basically engineer a product and then they start sort of like, oh, and we could do this and we could do that, and maybe if somebody has this problem and then maybe says, and then you end up with this huge bloated thing that's taken years to develop, and then it goes out in the market, nobody wants it and it flops. So the lean startup is that you come out with like a minimally viable product. I'm not saying this always works, but I want you to notice the product. So it's a minimally viable product. So you, in essence, create the minimal amount of problems for yourself. Like you got to design it and whatever and get it to market. and then you put it out there, and then people will give you feedback. And that feedback then tells you, well, it tells you what they need, but that also is an indicator to you, like, what do I have to do? Do I have to hire more engineers on this end? Do I have to hire more designers? What problems now do I have to take on myself, solve those in an efficient way, then to return the product that you want? It's one way to help me or help the designer not just go down fantasy land. For those of you who want to go into academia, you will see this in every academic committee, right? There's a problem to be solved. It gets addressed for 2 minutes, and then all of a sudden the hypotheticals are engaged in. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? What if they need, and then you end up, and partially because they never go to the students and ask them, right? Well, that can happen in the private sector too. Engineers can do that. Software engineers can do that. Every time they change Adobe, I'm like, what the hell have you done? Right? It's because you're not getting this feedback. And the feedback is important, not just to solve the consumer's problems, but Hayek talks about the knowledge problem. This is what gives you the knowledge so that then you can organize your production, right? Your productive abilities in a way that's efficient to then give the people what they want. And now, here's the kicker. You're not giving them a solution. You're giving them a better problem set, right? The car is not the solution for the horse. The car is a problem set that most people prefer over the horse. Not everybody, because some people raise horses. But I don't want to do animal husbandry. I'd rather take my car to a garage, right? I'd rather be able to drive at 55. By the way, that's another problem, right? Because if I'm driving at speed and it's raining and I need windshield wipers, I mean, it's a whole set. A car is a set of problems. If you don't realize that, don't buy a car. Same with the house. Oh, we need housing. Time out. Yes, you do. But I'd like to go back and I'd like to look at like Habitat for Humanity's success rate, not in getting people into houses, but what like the 5 and 10 year rates of staying in the houses are. Because when you own a house, every single problem of the house is your problem. It's not like owning a house solves, it's a solution to renting. No, it's an entirely different problem set. And you either better know who to call or how to fix. But that's the thing. You give people a problem set they'd rather solve. And that also helps keep your eye on the ball, right? Because I have a tendency when you start to think about the solutions that sort of other directedness ends. Like, okay, you got your solution, we're done. Oh, we can provide this tweak, we can provide this tweak, or we can provide, and then we forget about you, and then all of a sudden we wonder why you've walked away from our product. Well, you've walked away from the product because I've made it more of a problem than it is a solution. How many people know what the Segway is? That's what Bill does all the time. No, not that Segway. Yeah, you read about the Segway, and the guy who invented it was in love with it. Steve Jobs saw it, like people saw it, and they ride around on it, and they're like, this is great. This is wonderful. And then it goes on the market and it flops. Why? Is it because it was a bad product? No. It just wasn't a good problem exchange, right? The problem it was meant to solve was walking. But it turns out that if you wanted to have a Segway, it was more problematic taking care of and storing and doing everything you needed to do. That walking was actually an easier problem set. Not that the Segway wasn't cool, right? Especially if you're a mall cop, you can do that. But so that's kind of what I wanted to look at. And that's the story, right? This is the story of problem solving, and that's a cool story. If you don't think that, how many people have seen The Imitation Game? What's The Imitation Game about?
Alan Turing.
Who?
Alan Turing.
Alan Turing. What did Alan Turing do? I want to get some new faces. Do I see anybody else new? What did Alan Turing do? Over here. He helped crack the Enigma code. Now, I'm not saying the movie is 100% like real life was, but in the movie, one of the greatest lines is when he tells the admiral who's running the project that he doesn't speak German and he's about to get fired. He's like, but I do like solving puzzles. I do like solving problems. And that's the whole movie, and you get sucked right into it. I mean, if you think about it, in one sense, it's the most boring thing in the world. But you get sucked into the problems that he has to solve, and guess what? The problems are both technical in creating Christopher and social, right? Because he has to deal with his teammates. That's business. And why don't we get sucked into the same story? Okay? Because it is. It's the same endeavor. It's the same trials and tribulations, triumphs and heartbreaks. There's I don't know the name of it, but there's a book about United States industry in World War II and how we ended up outproducing the Japanese and the Germans, which was very crucial to our victory. In fact, my econ professor was a Luftwaffe pilot, I kid you not. And he talks about it in the war. He's like, of course you won. We'd send up 20 fighters and you'd have 500 bombers. And even though the bomber kill ratio was obscene and very bad for bomber pilots, it didn't matter because then we'd have another 500 and another 500. We outproduced them. The whole story of how that works, take a look at that. It's a wonderful problem-solving story. And yet we don't hear them. So, what is business? Yes, everything that you said, making money, value added, and all of that. But what I want to say is it's the story. And it's not just the story of making money. It's part of it, but it's a human story, right? It's part of our humanity. It predates history. In fact, it could even be responsible in the very technical sense for history if it's the origin of writing. It's deeply human. This is a human story we're telling. Well, what is that human story going to be? Well, the human story is humans getting to know each other. It's not antisocial. It's, in fact, exceptionally social. So humans getting to know each other. And in a pleasantly bizarre way, humans complicating their own lives in order to satisfy or try to satisfy the needs of other people in such a way that they get a return on that. And by the way, that whole problem-solving thing kind of, right, if I'm just providing solutions, it's like, why do you didn't make that, right? That's not yours. You stole the ideas from wherever in history or whatever. No, you start looking at all the problems you have to create for yourself in order to solve those solutions. You're going to start seeing exactly why people not only deserve remuneration, sorry, Hayek, people do deserve stuff, right? Not only that you do deserve, but the very fragile motivation system there. I'm making my life hell, I better get a return. All right? I do like helping. I probably have a purpose. There's a reason I'm producing what I'm producing. I'm producing Diet Coke. I'm not producing makeup. I'm not producing carpets. Okay? So yeah, there's a bit of that juice going on. But never forget, I'm making my life more complicated in order to do this. And if the government even further complicates that, I can walk away. I'm done. That's the fragility of that incentive structure. So it's a human story. It's a great story of us taking costs on ourselves in order to satisfy needs so that we get those costs recuperated plus. And then in the end, it's a story then, and this is unpopular to say, but it's a story of progress. I don't think people believe in progress anymore. Ain't that weird? I think everybody believes we're just going to kind of snuff out in a melted globe. And I think part of the reason is we've looked, or people have looked at government too much for progress. Look at the businesses. And there are real questions then that we can ask about coming back up to theory. Like, why is it that in the digital world we see a lot of progress, but in the physical world we don't? Right? Where are we seeing progress and where not? And shock, surprise, I would say start looking at regulations. start looking at the laws that govern these things, start looking at those sort of things, and I think we'll get part of that story. But never forget, whether it's tariffs or other taxes or other regulations, first and foremost, what you're doing is interfering in the story. Here's a person trying to do this in order to make people better off, and here you come in and you're screwing it all up. And all the costs that has. And we just don't tell that story well enough. So that's kind of what I wanted to throw out there with the what is business. Right? Not a philosopher trying to give you some definition, but kind of like the common law, let's go into the cases and tell the story of the cases and why they're important. And then that breathes life into the theory, and hopefully give us a little bit more to use as we go out in the world and talk. We have some time here. Do you have any questions, comments? Throw anything at me?
I'm very curious, as a philosopher, how did you get interested in business?
I always liked econ. I think it's a roundabout way. So one of the reasons philosophers don't like business is because business supposedly just deals with the ephemeral, the fleeting, the desire of the moment. And that's not truth, right? Plato knows what truth is. You have to have the forms of the truth. And that's what the higher, calling is about, to find those truths that are eternal. Even the relativists believe that, by the way. But I always liked Hume. And Hume's very grounded in convention. Hume's very grounded in particulars. I mean, so grounded in particulars, he says, people talk about this I, like it's one thing, but when I turn when I look at myself inward, I don't see one I see different preferences, different likes, different dislikes, different periods of history. I see a whole mass of different things that come together to make me. And so that sort of conventional, if you want to call it pluralistic, how conventions are made in the world, how cooperation and coordination is achieved, like if you do some game theory and stuff like that, sort of leads you to the micro level. And that's individuals, but you start realizing that individuals by themselves don't do business. We form organizations, and so then I get interested. And then, much like with Hume, I reject a higher metaphysics, and much like with the common law, whatever, it's like, what solutions are we building from the ground up, and what can we learn from that? And that's kind of how I got there. It just took a long time. Other questions? Sir?
When I totally agree with your idea of business as a human story, how we interact with each other as a humanity about it, totally agree with that. But what do you think about the current state of Wall Street, what it's done, particularly in the 2008 financial crisis? Where, I don't know, I don't feel like it was business. I just felt like it was just greed with these faulty instruments that led to high unemployment rates for particularly the middle class. I don't think there's a human story about that. I mean, business is supposed to use it to our fortune.
Well, it might not always be a good story. I don't. I'm being neutral about this, because if you read Michael Lewis's Liar's Poker about mortgage bundling, we find an incredible story of hubris gone wrong, and it's a fine as play as any Greek could write. So it's still a human story. It's just. I want to be true to what I've said here. The devil's in the details of that story. They bundled, I take it when you're talking about the mortgage bundling, they bundled the mortgages, which was apparently, from what I understand, mathematically correct, although it was deeply flawed. They did it, yes, to make money so that then they could sell those bundled mortgages like in a secondary market, because apparently, the mortgage departments before this were just kind of flat, so that then they could make money off the mortgages. I don't find anything inherently wrong with that. There is risk involved, and so we could ask and further investigate what people knew about the risks of those models. But here's, and I'm willing to go into that, because if you read Michael Lewis's book, Liar's Poker, you wanted to make $1 million on the floor, and this is his terminology, you wanted to make $1 million on the floor so that then you could earn the title Big Swinging Dick. Like, we're talking about a culture now, a company culture that might be problematic, right? There's something kind of wrong about that culture that's kind of gone off, this sort of hyper, but with that said, when I was a younger man in the 80s, there used to be these things called savings and loans. And during the double-digit inflation of the late 70s and even early 80s, savings and loans were started to provide mortgages, right? That's what they pooled the community's money together, and then they gave mortgages. But the federal government capped mortgage rates, 3%, 4%, and you have inflation at 9 to 12%. So they're actually losing money hand over fist. They do this little deregulation thing where the S&Ls now can invest in commercial properties and other things like that to try to earn a rate of interest that'll make up for the inflation. So of course, all this money now from S&Ls go into these high return things like commercial real estate and oil. That goes bankrupt, the savings and loans are gone. You think the financial crisis of 2008 was bad. Go back and read of how many billions of dollars just vanished and the federal government had to bail people out through FDIC. Greed? Sure. But once again, this damn thing called a mortgage is still at the center of it. Mortgages backed by the federal government, mortgages advocated, you gotta have a home by the federal government, all the sort of rules and regulations on the interest that can be charged and how these things can be. So, yeah, I admit that there are poison cultures, and we ought to call them out, because ethics is a part of life. But damn it, if this damn mortgage thing doesn't keep popping up in these financial disasters. So I'd actually like to go back and look at that and see to what extent our legal structuring of that isn't helping contribute to the problem. That's all I'd like to say on that. Other questions?
A bit to swing to the other side of that discussion.
Okay, so we're going Marxist. No, not that side.
No, but in a sense.
Okay, sure, go for it.
In the sense of business, you also have like an incentive to lower costs. But
yeah,
in that sense, doesn't that give the bad rap that you say? Because even if when you're talking about business, you ship off your labor to China, and then everything becomes a whole rights issue there. Like with the textile industry there, the cotton that's picked from China is obviously from a genocide that's happening to a population in the Uyghurs, or however it's pronounced. So
I understand.
How does good business and a good story correlate with that?
So, and this comes back to the charity thing. I do think it's worth walking through, once again, the what is business, because I think this is, we talked about voluntary trade. That came up many a time. So it might be the case that where voluntary trade isn't involved, we start talking about it not being business anymore. So if I'm dealing with a company that's literally using prisoner slaves, I'm really not doing business. It looks like it, and this is the dangerous part, it looks like it, but I'm actually, it's like buying a stolen bicycle, right? You never had the right to the bicycle. I buy it, it looks like business, but it's not because the property rate was never there to change. So the same with these people who are now being forced labor, right? We could technically say that the original firm doesn't have a property right to the good that they've produced because they never got the consent of the people who made it. And so it's fruit of the poison tree. I think it's a very important question. I wish it would have come up more in the tariff talks. I think that's another avenue to approach to that, but it just wasn't. It was just this unfairness because of imbalance of trade. Blah. But yeah, it's a real question. And businesses have to deal with that. But then the other question, and this is a tough one, because now this raises us back up to sort of policy and political theory. Is it a better agent for change if we voluntarily trade with a country, even though we know there are moral violations going on there? Or is it morally better to quit trading with them? Will that force them to the table? And that's a real question, because countries we have embargoes against and stuff like that, there doesn't seem to be any evidence that it leads them to be better, whether it's Iran, Russia, or Cuba. So there's a real policy question there, even over business. But that's what I like. This question about individually doing business with these companies now leads to these policy questions, and we can keep it grounded rather than some philosopher going off on some ideal world. We can keep our eye on the ball here. I'll have time for one more question. Did I get one from you earlier?
No.
Okay, good. Then let's go.
I was just curious. I was really interested in what you were talking about, with the story around business. But I was curious, within that, what role is played by wage labor as opposed to, entrepreneurs? Because are they fundamental to the story, or are they extraneous to it?
I like this question. Here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Go read, oh God, I'm going to forget his name in the moment. Advertisement for the Waldorf Astoria. It's a poem by, somebody give me his name. He's a black Renaissance, he's a black poet out of Harlem during the Harlem Renaissance, and I can't remember his name. You all have computers and stuff in front of you. Huh? Advertisement for Waldorf Astoria. And I'm blanking on his name. Langston Hughes. Langston's not a free market guy, by the way. But I love Langston Hughes' poem because it incorporates poverty, race, wage labor, owners. Like in a very short poem, every single argument, right, about how important that kind of thing is. And I think it's a good touchstone to start from. I don't have an ultimate answer. I think that Langston Hughes' poem is powerful because it does hit some nerves, but I also think it misses the mark on other points. That's what I'm going to say. So I don't have a final answer on it. I'm just saying that, yeah, if you look at poems like that or read Upton Sinclair and stuff like that, that is a primary question. And if you're going to advocate for markets, the story of wage labor has to be addressed. And there will be good episodes to that and heinous episodes to that. But that's the fun of doing this, right? I mean, I know I'm out of time, but here's what I've always found this humorous, right? Almost every libertarian I know thinks that statutes that apply to everybody everywhere all the time are like disastrous, right? That's like the worst kind of legislation. And yet what we want to do is turn to John Stuart Mill to find the harm principle that provides the statute for, that's coercion for everything. And it's just like, it drives me nuts. I want to go into the cases. I want to find out what was wrong. I want to find out what was right, because I think that's where the lessons lie, right? So I don't mean to cop out on that, but we can talk later about some other stuff. Thank you all very much, and I hope you have a great day.